Yet the terror of the Blitz meets with heroic resistance. But the image of a nation united against the German onslaught was an illusion of government propaganda. Not everybody was fighting for the common cause. In Blitz cities, crime rates almost doubled as looting, armed robbery and black marketeering spiraled out of control.
Well, for crime, speaking for myself and many others I know, it was the most exciting and profitable time there's ever been. The best period ever to be a rascal. It breaks my heart to think that Hitler surrendered, as the war was a criminal's paradise.
Be as slippery as an eel and as cunning as a fox, and you'll always have meat in your old tobacco box, and that was me. That was my saying.
I did exactly 2 years, and never a glad a day was it when I walked out of that place and told never to come back. But I didn't learn. It didn't learn me a thing.
The war was a breeding ground for crime and provided the opportunity for the criminal underworld to grow and prosper as never before. The exploits of gangsters and mobs would later be glamorized in feature films, but the brutal reality of crime on the home front was very different. The wartime crime wave posed such a devastating threat to morale, the government suppressed the details. Now we can reveal what truly happened. This is the untold story of the bad boys of the Blitz. When the Second World War began in September 1939, conscription was introduced and all young men were called up for military service. However, not all headed off to the army barracks. Many deserted and disappeared into the thriving underworld, like Mobster Frankie Fraser, who would become one of the most notorious criminals of recent times.
My mother always needed a little bit of paper to start the fire alight in the morning, so I give me army papers there, and they went up in flames. And from that moment, I was on a deserter. You couldn't go home, because it wouldn't be fair to them, because every so often the police would be raiding it to try and find you, because you were a deserter from the army.
Many young offenders serving their time in Borstal were released early to fight for king and country. The government assumed they would do their bit, but many found the strict military discipline intolerable. Very soon they too would join the growing army of more than 20,000 deserters who lived by crime, like former street urchin and small-time criminal Spud Murphy.
When I came out of Borstal, I thought that was bad enough, and when I got in the army, I never met such a lot of in all my life. Left, right, do this, that, I'm off. I just got all the equipment that they give me and slung it all in the Thames. That's what I thought of it, and then I was a deserter.
Over 1.5 million GIs arrived in Britain as the United States entered the war. Their presence was to dramatically heighten the violence of the criminal underworld. They brought with them a gun culture and a willingness to sell handguns and ammunition onto the black market. It was a very attractive proposition to criminals like Frankie Fraser and his gang.
They were always willing to trade a gun for money, as they could easily sort of nick more off their company sergeant major's office or suppliers. So you'd always had a few Americans willing to slip you one or two, and then you went to town, if necessary.
Allegedly overpaid, oversexed and overhere, GIs were also targets for robbery, usually when they were at their most vulnerable.
When they come out of dances, you know, like in blackout, and some of them had a drink and flashing their money or anything, they were just relieved of it. One of us, they got a light, and when they pulled it out, and just push them against the wall and take whatever they got.
The gangs showed no mercy to members of the public who tried to stop them.
You'd always get them brave people during the war, they're very brave, and they would be flying at you. So you had to let them see you were determined, and it generally worked, you know, with a lovely bar of iron in my hand, waving it about like a lunatic. But if they did come a bit near, well, you had to give them a clout with it, obviously.
By 1942, 3 years into the war, a new and more devastating type of crime hit offices, shops and banks: safe-breaking. Gangs like the Billy Hill mob were now using the expertise and explosives picked up from associates serving in the army.
If their safe had to be blown, you always had an American willing to give you the jelly knife to do it with.
All set.
You'd also always have someone on the firm who was an expert at opening safes. And there was a man called Jock the Fitter, Jock Robinson. Brilliant. He could make keys and everything. And when you nicked a safe, you'd employ Jock to open it for you. 9 times out of 10, he'd have a key to do it. If not, he'd blow it open for you. He was brilliant.
Time was running out for the police to combat the growing power of organised crime and the big increase in armed robberies.
Hey! Come on, get it quick time. Quick time! Come on, please, guys. Come on. Come on, settle down. Settle down. He's up, yeah. Come on.
From 1942 onwards, they began to fight back. With the worst of the Blitz over, there were many more men available for day-to-day patrol duties. Some were recalled from the army, and all were better trained. The first successes were in catching young offenders and looters, like Roy Hill. Looting was technically a hanging offence, but it was so widespread those caught were treated leniently and given a short custodial sentence. Boys under the age of 16 were often given a second chance.
Never even heard the word loot. Never even heard of it. I knew I was pinching. Oh, I knew I was thieving. It wasn't until later on, quite some time later, that somebody said, that's looting, you could be hung for that, you know. That terrified me, I must admit. But by then it was too late, I'd done it. If you were lucky, you got away with it. I was lucky for quite some while. So one day I was caught, coming out, Bobby in uniform. And in them days, they did grab you by the ear.
Let me go, I haven't done nothing.
And they let me off. Nothing. Don't be a naughty boy, don't do it again. A few weeks later, exactly the same thing happened. So this time they took me to court and they put me on probation.
Special teams of police tracked down deserters and rounded them up. But some, like Spud Murphy, wouldn't remain in custody for long.
I felt like a fox with a pack after me. Everywhere you go, you was hunted like the fox.
Oh, I got caught, took back, they took me to Woolwich barracks and then sent for escorts and handcuffed me and said, you're a deserter and good men's getting killed while you're running and deserting, and so you got a good flumping off of them. Then when they let you out, expect you to be a good soldier.
Boys on probation like Roy Hill knew that if they stole again, there would be very serious consequences, and they too would be put away. Despite this threat, there were so many opportunities for crime in wartime Britain, they often pushed their luck too far.
We was playing about on what used to be a social club's ground, cricket ground, and I spotted these two fellas in the old air raid shelter down at the bottom of the greens. I wondered what they'd done. So I waited for them to go, and I crawled into this old air raid shelter. It was on a surface shelter, brick, and so on. And inside I found a cardboard box, and it was full of cigarettes. Where they got them from, I don't know. So it doesn't leave much to the imagination. I took the cigarettes. I went round the pub selling these cigarettes. I mean, if the people who obviously planted them there had ever caught me, they'd have killed me, no danger. But they didn't. But a Bobby did. I tried to sell him a packet of 10 wood bands, I'll never forget it. I thought, plenty of times afterwards, I thought, well, how daft can you get trying to sell a Bobby stolen cigarettes, you know? And he took me in again, overnight in the cells. And he took me to court.
We've tried you on probation. It's been a complete failure. You leave us little alternative. You must now go to an approved school. But the amount of time that you remain there depends on how you behave. This is your one real chance to grow up into a decent citizen.
They weren't having any this time. They should go to an approved school. So my mum's breaking her heart. I'm crying my eyes out because my mum's crying. I'm playing English. It was a kid's prison. It was as simple as that.
Every tree I see, nor every flower.
London's West End became the playground for the capital's most successful wartime criminals. Many gravitated to the late-night clubs and bars of Soho, where the rules that regulated drinking hours were broken every night. Here, the mobsters could dress like toffs and enjoy their new spending power.
Well, Soho during the war was the most wonderfulest place in the world. It was out of this world. You could have a drink there 24 hours a day. Not legally, of course. I was a very good spender. I wasn't mean or anything. And I drank like a fish and happy to spend it. And it was wonderful. You were the smartest guys ever. You know, you look like little film stars.
It was a different story for the bad boys who'd been caught and were now starting to serve their time at approved school or borstal. They faced a harsh regime, designed to instill discipline and crush any spirit of rebellion. In September 1942, Roy Hill was sent to an approved school near Southport.
You never knew what a master or a sir was going to do. You never knew. He had complete control over you.
Stand over there and let's have a look at you.
You never spoke unless you were spoken to by a master.
How old are you, lad?
And you always called him sir.
Ever had a job? No, sir. Well, there's plenty of time.
So you had to have respect. You had to say yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. If you said something wrong, you would be punished.
If you throw your weight about and try to show how tough you are, things won't be very nice.
Army deserters who lived by small-time crime looked to make their home in any nook and cranny unknown to the police. They were constantly on the move, trying to avoid detection and stealing to survive.
There was a place near the old Millwall football ground, United Glass Blowers it was called, and underneath they used to have all the furnaces to produce the, well, it was an ideal spot to get under there. No one was going down there, and it was nice and warm and comfortable. It was a second home, and a lot of us used to be there. So it was sort of deserters hotel. It was get a casual job in hotels in the West End, and there again, could be air raids during the daytime, and you'll be cleaning up and doing that, and you just slip into every room and clear them out. The cleaning, that's the sort of cleaning I done. I cleared them out of all their valuables, and then I hit the road jack and I was gone.
It was a world away to the glamorous nightlife enjoyed by members of the leading gangs. One of their big perks was sexual favours from women out on the town, looking for a good time.
If you was a rascal, you was home and dry. The women couldn't have enough of you. So they knew you had plenty of money. You would always get them a clothing coupon, whatever they wanted. Sex then was free and easy, thank God. No, what I mean is that even the women were more didn't care a damn. Because, you know, that's what it made them. You may not be living the next day, so let's enjoy ourselves today. Thank God for that.
A few days later, I hadn't time to dwell on loneliness, working at the factory, and at lunchtime, like the other women, hurrying out to try and get a bit of shopping done. Yes, I grumbled sometimes, but I always felt ashamed afterwards, knowing how much more he was having to go through out there.
propaganda films celebrated women's heroic contribution to the war effort. But hidden from view was the fact that crime amongst young women was also on the increase. Prostitution was the most common offense. The lure of sex for sale was so powerful, it could entice the most reputable members of society to risk everything. In one extraordinary case in June 1943, a brothel in London's West End was raided by Chief Superintendent Percy Burgess. The details of what his squad uncovered were never revealed.
So we went in the first room we went into, there was a naked man and woman lying in the bed, just lying in the bed talking. And on this chair at the side of his bed was a group captain's uniform. They were terribly distressed. The woman in particular, she was really distraught. We went to 2 other bedrooms, both occupied, one by a naval officer and one by an army officer. By this time, all hell's bells were ringing. Madam appeared. She was also very, very upset. We then found out she'd got 2 volumes downstairs in her office, 2 big, thick volumes. Each woman had 3 pages. They were all respectable married women. Their particulars were entered with a photograph and their page in the volume. The then Army or Navy or whatever officer, it's got to be a service officer. No civilians were entertained. It's got to be a service officer. Came, looked through the book, chose the one he fancied. If they wanted to do anything further, they did. But before they went, they had to leave £5 in a sealed envelope on the mantelpiece, which is what she charged for the introduction. But what financial transactions occurred was between them only. We found out they were being paid about £20 a time. And it was always, as far as we found out, sexual intercourse. The week afterwards, we were ordered to take the volumes to the basement in Scotland Yard, where they were burnt in the furnace. I never heard another word about it.
But it was amongst young women of the lowest social class that crime was most prevalent during the war. Shoplifting was their most common crime, and many learnt their trade from the family, with fathers or brothers often setting the example. Frankie Fraser's older sister, Eva, had no more respect for the law than her brother.
She was only about just over 12 months older than me, not much, but 12, 15, 18 months older than me. So in that, we was very close. She was terrific. And we were the only 2 thieves in the family. My other 2 sisters and brother, they were 3 lovely straight people, as my father and mother were. Me and Eva were the only 2 rascals.
Eva worked her trade in and around London's West End. She was a member of the capital time gang of female criminals, the 40 Thieves.
Well, the 40 Thieves, I'm happy to say, were all women top shoplifters. They were wonderful. Once a woman was recruited into the 40 Thieves, she knew she'd made it. Thank God for that, my sister was one of them. And after that, I never ever had to buy a suit length, a shirt, or anything. I'll never forgive the magistrate who sentenced her to 6 months during the war. I then had to buy my own clothes.
In the last years of the war, Britain's overcrowded prisons, borstalls and approved schools set about the task of reforming their inmates with great zeal. To break their will, the staff often meted out indiscriminate punishments. One day Roy Hill was picked on for no reason by his master.
He then turned around and said, "Drop your pants and bend over the desk." I was spread right across the desk, my toes barely touching the floor. I then got 6 of the best. He didn't ask me to count them, but I did. I knew exactly how many he gave me. The first one, I did shout. It hurt. It cut. It stung. And then the 6th one, for some unknown reason, he must have hit exactly where he'd hit before. And that really did make me shout. It was as if I was being cut with something. It wasn't until much later on when I was able to look in the mirror, that's one of the lads showed me, that I had these big wells on my backside. I did exactly 2 years. Most people did between 16 and 18 months. I did 2 years. And never a gladder day was it when I walked out of that place and told never to come back. But I didn't learn. It didn't learn me a thing.
Within weeks, most of those who had served their time were back on the game again. And in 1944 and 1945 came new opportunities for crime. A second major blitz on London and the home counties, this time using flying bombs and rockets.
The flying bombs began to come over, first in ones and twos, and then all day long. As soon as one had passed over, you began to breathe again, another would come. And so it went on.
In the aftermath of the bombings, there would be again rich pickings for the criminals. On the 25th of November 1944, 160 died when a rocket hit a shopping centre in New Cross in South London. But this was Spud Murphy's home community, and he found it within himself to do his bit and save lives.
When the bombs dropped, I mean, I've been amongst the debris, digging people out, dying and injured and crippled and blood all over the place. I helped in New Cross when the rocket dropped, and still not digging just for hours, I'm talking about days, digging to help people to get out.
I come away feeling a bit better. Felt it was even Stevens. I've took a lot out and I put a bit back.
The roots of wartime crime and the most notorious criminals sprang from poor working-class communities with a strong sense of them and us, born out of generations of poverty and hardship. Villains like Frankie Fraser refused to accept what they did was wrong. They were looking after themselves, their friends, their families, and most of all, their mums, in the best way they could.
Many people ask me, surely, Frank, you must have realised you were doing wrong. No, we never. I certainly didn't anyway. Really, we were redistributing the wealth that we'd stolen and making sure the right people got some of it. And of course, I did look after me mum. I loved her. She was a wonderful lady. Well, I couldn't go home. I was on the run. But you'd meet around someone's house or in a pub or something, you know, and that. Or there'd always be people who would have a safe house for you. And mum could come round there and see you, and you'd have a drink with her and give her a few quid. All she would say is, thanks, son, and give me a big kiss.
But after Roy Hill came out from approved school in September 1944, he broke the thieves' code of honour and stole from his own mother.
I met this lad. Can't think of his first name, but his second name was Benson. I was in an arcade in Manchester, you know, the old bandit type arcade. And he just turned around one day and he said, I'm going to see my girlfriend up in Aberdeen. You want to come? Well, I was game for anything. Yeah, of course, gone. Never given a thought to my mum. Nothing like that. My mum, in them days, we had a radio. But so I took it. I stole the radio off my mum. It's as simple as that. And I got £6 for that in Oldham Street in Manchester, pawn shop. All I knew was that I was going to enjoy tomorrow. That's what I was living for, tomorrow. I was going to enjoy it and get the most out of it that I could. So off we went to Aberdeen.
It was the last year of the war, and Roy's theft would have very serious consequences for him. Back in London on April the 3rd, 1945, Frankie Fraser and his gang had just pulled off their latest raid on a warehouse in the East End. Then they were involved in a high-speed car chase through the city streets.
They're onto us.
And on our way back, somehow or other, someone got our numbers. And the police chased us from Upminster all the way through London, about 4 in the morning.
Turning north into Rotherhithe Tunnel.
And right in the middle of Rotherhithe Tunnel, we run out of petrol. You couldn't make it up, with half a dozen police cars behind us. The others come from Bermondsey, and they knew more about the tunnel than me, but at the Bermondsey end, there were like stairs from the bottom of the tunnel leading up. And of course they went up there and got away. I didn't realise. I got caught, me and Spindles Jackson. I only got 20 months at the Old Bailey.
Take care of it, watch out.
Spindles got 2 years. No, that was part and parcel of the game. Some you might get away, some you might get caught. And if you did get caught, so be it.
By 1945, a better resourced police force was finally bringing the crime wave under control. Frankie Fraser wasn't the only one to end up behind bars. It was payback time for the bad boys as they faced the full and brutal force of the law. In 1945, the last year of the war, the bad boys got their comeuppance. Shortly after Roy Hill arrived in Aberdeen, he was arrested for breaking into an air raid shelter. He had just been looking for a place to sleep, but the authorities north of the border showed little leniency.
For that, they gave me a month in Aberdeen prison. And there, you were locked in there for 23 hours a day. You were locked in that cell, all on your own, nobody else. 4 brick walls, a little window at the top, little wooden table that you had to scrub every morning, that you dined on. You had a spoon and a knife which was made out of tin. And boredom, nothing else but boredom. I'm sat at the table one morning and I scrubbed it, passed the inspection. And I'm sat there and I got the point of the knife and I carved my initials into the top of this wooden table. I was immediately dragged out and taken down to the governor. You're on bread and water and solitary confinement for a week. And that's exactly what I was. I wasn't allowed to speak, not even to a screw. I wasn't allowed to speak at anything.
Army deserter and thief Spud Murphy was finally captured in the spring of 1945.
I got 28 days in Fort Darwin. That was an army prison. When I got in there, a few of us thought we was hard men. They said stand to attention and jump up and do this. We said we ain't gonna do nothing like that, do what you want to do. And then about 10 of them come out and said, so you think you're a load of wild horses, do you? Well, we got the jockeys in here to ride you, and they did. They turned those pipes on us and beat us with the sticks and soon come to our senses.
But the army never broke Spud's defiance, and he returned to crime after the war. After serving his month's sentence in Aberdeen prison, Roy Hill was released. However, one of his forgotten crimes would soon come back to haunt him.
Walked out of the doors of the prison. I've been serving me 30 days. And there's a gigantic detective stood there in a nice suit. Roy Hill. And that made me thinking I was free. You're under arrest. Why, what for? Stealing a radio. And it was only at that moment of time that it flashed back to me. I'd stolen my mum's radio. And that was it. Once again, I got back here after a 12-hour journey back to Manchester from Aberdeen on the train. The following morning, back in court again. This time it was 3 months. In strange ways, D-wing. All alone, back to square one again.
Life inside was brutal for serious offenders like Frankie Fraser. The most feared punishment was the birch, which was given for the smallest misdemeanor.
You could wait up to 14 days for the birch, and in that 14 days they played on your nerves if they could. And you hear rustle of keys down the punishment block, completely all isolated. Open up, Fraser. Francis Davison Fraser, been sentenced to 18 strokes of corporal punishment, the birch. And he was took down and he went over a barrel on your bare bum, mind, just sticking up. That sentence will now begin. Stroke 1. And that's it. The pain was absolutely unbelievable. And I always had big, strong men to do it. You could really give force, and they'd give it everything.
However great the pain, Frankie was determined not to let it show.
You wouldn't. Your pride wouldn't let you, because that's what they would be dying to hear. You screaming out, no, no, because some poor sods did. Oh, they loved it then. So there's no way I would do that. I'd rather die. No way.
Finally released from Strangeways, the reunion with his mother was to have a profound effect upon Roy Hill.
I came out, my mum was waiting for me at the gate, cried her eyes out again. And I remember thinking to myself, I'll never hurt you again, Mum, as long as I live. I will never hurt you again. I was still her baby. No matter what happened, no matter how old I was still her baby. And I was her reason for living. It was as simple as that. But that day I said, I'll never do anything wrong again, not as long as I live. And to my knowledge, I never have.
Not all of the bad boys of the Blitz were so repentant. Frankie Fraser continued his life of crime, becoming one of Britain's most feared and dangerous criminals. Over the next 5 decades, he would serve 42 years in prison for robbery, attempted murder, and grievous bodily harm. Mad Frankie, as he became known, spent half his life behind bars, but managed to escape conviction for murder.
Police say I've killed 40 people. That's what they say. If they'd have said 39 or 41, I'd have really been upset. I hate odd numbers. But that's what they say, 40. Who am I to argue?
The truth about the crime wave on the home front was never revealed at the time because it was too damaging to morale. When the war was over, it remained hidden, as it didn't fit the patriotic image of a nation that had won a heroic victory over Hitler. In fact, the war had provided such a rich breeding ground for crime and the criminal underworld, it was to prove a turning point. As the old world of respect for the law was swept away, the pattern was set for crime to increase dramatically over the next 60 years.